So after the hard facts, we are now gonna come to the stuff that really is gonna interest you. And that is how the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem in Austria actually works. Birgit is our startup expert, and she's gonna give you all the details about that now.
Austria perhaps was not the first one to catch on when it comes to the startup location. But it's fair to say that Austria over the last couple of years has developed into becoming really a startup hub within Europe. The Forbes magazine actually called Austria once the up-and-coming early-stage startup capital of Europe, and was referring to the many funding and subsidy programs available for startups in Austria. The overall ecosystem has developed nicely. We have actually tried to capture the Austrian startup ecosystem by having put in a few bubbles where you see the names of the players and stakeholders within the various categories. Because I think a startup ecosystem works if each of these necessary ingredients of the ecosystem grow in equilibrium. For example, take the bubble of the angel investors, the business angels as well as the venture capital funds. It's important that this bubble grows as well as the entrepreneurial-minded, innovative startup guys that want to implement interesting and innovative business models. If each of the bubble grows in sync, then it works. And I think in Austria we have seen such a development. New funds have become available in line with new accelerator programs. Co-working spaces have developed and grown tremendously within Austria. At the same time, the associations and support instruments that cater to the startups on the one hand, as well as to the investors on the other hand, have also similarly developed and become more and more professional. Please also have a look at our overview of the startup ecosystem, where we have tried to capture the most important stakeholders for each of the various ingredients. The number of Austrian startups over the course of the last couple of years has grown quite nicely. Which sectors are actually prevalent? Austrian startups are mainly active in the field of ICT. ICT, digitalization, is the big buzzword everywhere, and so therefore these startups then have clients in various industrial sectors. Another important segment of Austrian startups is life sciences. Austria, as a life science location, has a very strong tradition. What we see now is many innovative startups in the area of pharmaceutical engineering, but also e-health, medtech, and so forth. Austria has relatively fewer startups that are active in the area of consumer products. This has perhaps to do that also the Austrian economy is very strong in the B2B business segment. But Austria definitely is known for many hardware startups with strong technological content and focus.
So, what are some of the success stories of Austrian startups? One of the most famous ones actually does come from the niche of the consumer products that Birgit just mentioned, and that is Runtastic. If you're a runner, you have surely come across Runtastic. It has been developed by a team of students, really not in a big city, but in quite a small village in Hub Austria. I'm especially proud to say that because I'm from that region as well. And they've sold it to Adidas for a couple of years ago for a very decent amount of money. And if you ever come to Austria and you're going to watch the Austrian version of the Lion's Den here, you're going to see the founders being active there and looking for new startups. Another startup that definitely has to be mentioned is N26. It was actually founded in Berlin by two Austrians. It has grown very successful also internationally over the last couple of years. And someday they realized that Vienna might be a good location, even though they're settled in Berlin, but to do some expansion here. And we are very happy that they're also doing the R&D here in Vienna and have now really established a considerable presence here in the capital.
For you as an international startup, I guess you are evaluating various locations. You have a choice. And when it comes to landing in Europe, you're probably looking at what each of those locations is offering to you. We have looked at Austria from the perspective of an international startup. What does an international startup look for in a business location when it comes to decision making where to locate? And in my opinion, having assisted many international startups to land here, I think there are 6 points that I would like to actually highlight. Number 1, and in my opinion most important of all, is market access clients. What is my potential client base here? And secondly, I would think talent base, especially in times like these where there is a war on talent globally, internationally. The availability of talent is also of utmost importance. Third, I would say as a startup, access to financing is another key ingredient. For especially an early stage startup, funding, and here I mean the availability of subsidy program, grant programs, support programs for research and development. So I would call that funding, access to funding is the 4th ingredient. And last but not least, I would say the availability of support. And here I mean non-financial support. Support in the form of advice, experience sharing, that kind of support would, in my opinion, be a key 5th ingredient for a startup to look for when it is about decision making, which location to choose. When it comes to market and customer base, we already heard Austria is an extremely rich country with a GDP per capita of 40,500 euros. The Austrian consumers have free spending available for actually innovative products and services to try out and experiment also. And also the Austrian companies, the whole B2B segment here in Austria. Also those, I think, are good potential clients for you. And as discussed earlier, given the extremely central location of Austria, it's not just the Austrian market, but it's really the European Union market. That is your market base here in Austria. With regards to talent, and especially the availability of talent, here I actually want to hand over to Matthias. He will actually give his opinion on that ingredient for a startup.
So, talking about talent, the access to talented people here in Austria will be key to your success as a startup, no matter in which branch or sector you're working. There's something very special about the Austrian educational system that I want to highlight there, and that is the vocational schools. That means that students already within their high school years will have training on the job, for instance in programming languages, in electronics, as a plumber or whatever. And that basically means that by the time they get out of school, they will be ready to work in a company because they have not only received just theoretical training like in a university, but they have worked and they've gained experience in a specific branch. And that, especially for startups, is very important, because you can use these people, or these people can work from day one. You can really use them in their functions that you want them to. Of course, Austria is also famous for its universities. There are two that are very world-renowned, I would say. One is the Technical University in Vienna, and the University of Economics and Business, also situated here in Vienna. But of course, there are a lot of smaller, we call them FHs, a Fachhochschule, which is also a program that is at university level, meaning you will graduate with a BAc or with a master, but at the same time you will have professional training, you will really have worked in companies, you have learned how companies work and what you can contribute there. And these people are very valuable. This is the feedback that we always get from the startups that are here, because again, they can be used in their positions basically from day one. Another very important point looking at the Austrian talent pool is, and that Birgit has also mentioned that before, is that we do get a lot of international, not only students, but also people who have graduated, who are ready to work. And this holds especially true for the Central and Eastern European countries, because of a history, of a common history that we have always had, but also because of a very high quality of life here in Vienna. And for you as a startup, that basically means that for the whole Central and Eastern European markets, you can find people here in Vienna who speak those languages. Meaning they will be fluent in German because they have lived or studied here. They will of course be fluent in English, but at the same time they will be able to speak Hungarian, Croatian, Polish, Turkish, whatever. And if you really want to work in those markets from Vienna or from Austria, then here you will find those people being fluent in these languages. And this is why a lot of international startups or companies even use Austria, use Vienna as their hub for Central and Eastern Europe. Of course, there's a reason why so many international students and workers come to Austria, and that is the high quality of life. No matter what study you look at, if it's Mercer, if it's the Economist Intelligence Unit, everywhere we score extremely high. Vienna has been named the most livable city from both of these more or less famous studies for I think 3 or 4 consecutive years now. So you can be sure that they are true on the one hand. And that is very important for international startups. That's really a big plus if you want to attract international talent to your company. What better motivation can you offer people from abroad, no matter if it's the United States, if it's Europe or Asia, then they have a chance to work in the most livable city of the planet.
A colleague of ours once actually said, Austria is a place where others come to spend their vacation. We actually work where others vacation it. So I think that already comprises what we Austrians are very used at, that first we work and then we jump into the old Danube, which is actually the natural water here right in the city center next to the metro stop.
Or you can go and visit one of the museums, enjoy the opera, or enjoy, as we've mentioned before, the Sacher cake, because it's not only what is world famous in Vienna, but of course also something that's eaten daily here in Vienna. And above all, and that is really a point you have to consider when coming to Europe, Vienna is a city which costs of living, let's say, are moderate. Especially compared to other German or even Swiss cities. Office rents in Vienna are really at a reasonable scale. You can see it on the slide that's coming up now. Also compared to cities like Prague, for example, or some other Central and Eastern European cities, Vienna is really competitive there, and also what the overall costs of living are concerned. If you compare it to Paris, if you compare it to London, or even some of the cities you are currently living in and working in, then your purchasing power here in Vienna, the capital you need to really live an excellent, decent life here, are very reasonable compared to other international cities. And that, of course, is another reason why so many international talents also come here to Austria, to Vienna.
To sum up, perhaps, I think it is this cost-quality package, so this overall package that is being offered, which makes Austria an attractive location to work. Therefore, from the perspective of, let's say, a tech company, a scale-up, a startup, the people, when they have a choice, actually much rather choose the Austrian tech company over, let's say, perhaps the company located in some other European city, because they know that even though perhaps the pay is higher in Paris or in London, the cost of living is also higher there, and therefore they settle for the high quality with perhaps a somewhat lower salary. This is something that we have heard from tech scale-ups such as Planradar and others who are recruiting internationally a lot. They definitely say that it is a big location advantage that here Austria is so attractive.